Kale Rin had faced danger many times before, but nothing like the inferno storm raging over Volera Prime. It was not just a storm. It was a living, breathing force of plasma, fire, and chaos. Cities had disappeared into it before anyone could react, and even the most advanced drones and automated rescue teams failed to survive its unpredictable bursts. Yet here he was, staring at the palace holofeed where alarms flashed red, his pulse pounding in rhythm with the sirens. The royal palace was being torn apart, and inside, the Princess Lyra was trapped. Kale's fingers tightened on the control panel of his hovercraft. Around him, other pilots hesitated, waiting for instructions, their faces pale under the emergency lights. None of them wanted to risk their lives in a storm that had devoured hundreds before. But Kale could not wait. He had seen too many lives lost because people refused to act. The rules, the safety protocols, they were nothing against the screaming need to act when someone's life was in immediate danger. He glanced at Lyra's image flickering on the screen. She was in the central tower, surrounded by the storm's chaotic energy. She was crying out, but the sound was swallowed by static and the storm's roar. The drones could not reach her. Their signals were jammed, their paths blocked by magnetic interference and plasma surges. Machines failed where humans could still succeed. That thought hardened Kale's resolve. "Kale, are you sure?" A voice called over the comms. It was Lieutenant Mara, a fellow pilot. Her words carried worry and hesitation. "That storm, it's not just dangerous, it's deadly. Even the military drones can't survive. Why would you think you can?" Kale didn't answer immediately. He stared at the swirling mass of light and fire outside the palace. The inferno was unpredictable, its patterns changing every second. It twisted like molten ribbons, reaching out as if it had a mind of its own. The wind ripped against the hovercraft's hull, and plasma arcs lit up the sky in violent flashes. Then he spoke, calm but firm, "Because I'm human. And humans don't wait for the impossible to become possible. We make it possible." He activated the thrusters. The craft lifted into the storm, each pulse of plasma threatening to tear it apart. Inside, Kale's training kicked in. He adjusted the controls, dodging arcs of energy that streaked through the air like jagged lightning. The holographic display flickered, showing collapsing buildings and bridges. Sections of the palace were already gone, crumbled into the energy storm like sand. Kale ignored the trembling in his stomach and focused on the trajectory toward the princess. The city beneath them had become unrecognizable. Streets that had once been bustling with vehicles and citizens were now rivers of molten energy, buildings shredded down to skeletal frames, and drones that had attempted rescue lay in smoking wreckage. Kale knew there was no time to admire the destruction. Every second counted. Inside the palace tower, Lyra's own fear had become almost tangible. She clung to a broken railing as debris fell around her, sparks from electrical conduits slicing the air dangerously close. The storm outside made the palace unstable. Floors collapsed under her feet, doors jammed, and walls began to glow red-hot. She screamed, but her voice was weak against the storm. She had been trained for emergencies, but nothing could have prepared her for this. She could see flashes of plasma tearing through the hallways, hear metal screeching and breaking apart. Panic threatened to take over, but she forced herself to focus. Somehow, she had to survive until someone came for her. Back in the storm, Kale spotted a falling piece of palace structure, a massive chunk of concrete mixed with twisted steel. It plummeted straight toward Lyra's location. With a swift maneuver, he angled the hovercraft and used a force shield to intercept it, pushing the debris away just in time. Sparks flew across the shield, reflecting the chaos surrounding him. The narrow margin of safety reminded him that there was no second chance here. One mistake, one delay, and it would be over. He activated the external thrusters and leapt the craft over a collapsing bridge, the inferno's light dancing over his determined face. The wind howled, the roar of the storm deafening, but Kale remained focused. He had survived countless missions, but this was different. This was personal, not because he knew Lyra well, but because he could not allow human lives to be decided by chance. This storm might be stronger than any natural disaster, but he had a human advantage: instinct, creativity, and courage. The tower was closer now. Kale could see Lyra through a crack in the palace walls, her figure illuminated by the flickering energy of the storm. She was small against the massive inferno, her hair blown in wild strands, her clothes torn. Every instinct told him to speed up, to move faster, and he did. The hovercraft shuddered violently as plasma arcs struck the hull. He gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Kale landed the hovercraft on a damaged section of the palace roof, the metal groaning under the weight. Sparks flew as he jumped out, using magnetic boots to cling to the warped metal surface. The wind threatened to blow him off entirely, but he advanced. Every step was a battle against nature's wrath. He reached the edge of the crumbling tower and saw Lyra trapped on a ledge that was about to collapse. Without hesitation, Kale ran, his boots clanging against the metal. He leapt across a widening gap, landing with a roll that sent dust and sparks into the air. Lyra's eyes widened in shock and relief. Kale extended his hand, and she grabbed it, holding on for dear life. The floor beneath them cracked and fell away, sending pieces of concrete and metal into the storm below. Kale pulled her up just in time, his muscles straining with the effort. They were not safe yet. The storm seemed to anticipate their movements, throwing plasma bursts and falling debris in unpredictable patterns. Kale knew they had to move quickly. He scanned the area, finding a series of damaged corridors that, if navigated correctly, could lead them to a more stable section of the palace. He gestured for Lyra to follow. She nodded, terrified but trusting him completely. Together, they ran through corridors that shuddered and cracked under the storm's assault. Sparks rained from overhead conduits, and walls warped under the intense heat. Kale used his training to anticipate falling sections, sometimes dragging Lyra back, sometimes vaulting over obstacles. The human mind, he thought, was far superior to any machine when unpredictability ruled the environment. At one point, a wall of fire erupted between them and their path. Kale assessed quickly. There was no time to find another route. He grabbed a metal pipe lying on the floor, extending it like a makeshift staff, and swung it into the fire. Sparks flew, smoke billowed, but the fires spread slow just enough for them to dash through. Lyra coughed but kept moving, trusting Kale to guide her. As they ran, Kale realized the storm was testing him in ways he had never imagined. The inferno was intelligent in its randomness, forcing him to improvise constantly. He felt adrenaline surge, not just from danger but from the exhilarating clarity that comes when survival is the only option. Every leap, every decision, every quick thought mattered. Finally, after what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, they reached a stairwell that seemed intact. Kale motioned for Lyra to go first, shielding her from the worst of the wind. The stairs twisted and bent under the storm's assault, but they held long enough for the two of them to ascend. At the top, they could see the palace roof and a hovercraft landing pad where a rescue ship could reach them, if they could survive long enough to get there. Kale paused, breathing heavily, sweat mixing with grime and soot on his face. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes, her fear tempered by awe. You came for me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Kale gave her a brief smile, brushing soot from his face. "I told you," he said simply. "Humans don't wait for the impossible to become possible. We make it possible." Her hand trembled in his as they prepared for the final dash to the roof. The storm had not relented. It roared louder, brighter, hungrier. Plasma arcs jumped across the palace, and sections of the roof had already fallen away. Kale knew one misstep here could mean death, but he also knew that hesitation would kill them both. With a quick nod, he led her toward the edge, jumping over gaps and dodging arcs of energy. They reached the hovercraft, and Kale opened the cockpit, helping Lyra inside. The ship shuddered as he started the engines, the inferno threatening to pull them back into its grasp. He glanced at the storm outside, feeling a rush of defiance. Humanity had survived worse. They had faced the unknown countless times, and today, Kale would prove that courage, quick thinking, and sheer human will could triumph over even the deadliest storm. As the hovercraft lifted from the roof, dodging another burst of plasma, Kale allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They were not safe yet, but they had survived the first trial. The inferno had been tested by humanity, and humanity had responded. He glanced at Lyra, her eyes wide with fear and wonder. Kale knew that this rescue was only the beginning. The storm would continue to challenge them, the city would need rebuilding, and the dangers of Volera Prime were far from over. But in that moment, hovering above the chaos, one truth was clear. Human courage, instinct, and determination could shine even in the most impossible of infernos. Kale Rin had leapt into the inferno, and he had not failed. The hovercraft shuddered violently as it cut through the storm, plasma arcs slicing the air like deadly blades. Kale's hands gripped the controls, his knuckles white, but his eyes were calm, scanning the chaos ahead. Lyra clutched the edge of her seat, her breath quick and shallow. The storm outside had not eased. It had grown stronger, more chaotic, as if it sensed that its prey was escaping. "This storm, it's alive," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "I've never seen anything like it." Kale glanced at her, offering a reassuring nod. "It's not alive," he said firmly. "It's dangerous, unpredictable, but it doesn't think. Humans think, humans adapt, and right now that's what will save us." The hovercraft bounced over molten debris, sparks flying past the cockpit as plasma arcs struck the craft's shields. The instruments flashed warnings, systems overloading under the storm's intense energy. Kale adjusted the thrusters, compensating for sudden gusts and magnetic interference. Every move had to be precise. One wrong calculation could send them crashing into the inferno below. Lyra's eyes widened as a massive burst of plasma erupted from a nearby building, hitting the air beside them with a thunderous explosion. The heat was almost tangible inside the cockpit. She gripped the seat tighter, feeling her heart pound. How can you stay so calm?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. Kale allowed himself a brief smile. "Because I have to, panic won't save you or me. Focus saves us." He adjusted the hovercraft's trajectory, dodging falling beams and molten metal that rained from the crumbling cityscape. The city had become unrecognizable. Streets that had once carried hovercars and pedestrians were rivers of molten energy. Buildings twisted and collapsed in seconds, reduced to skeletal frames. Drones and automated rescue units lay scattered in ruined heaps, proof that even the most advanced machines could not match the unpredictability of the inferno. Kale felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Humans still had the edge: instinct, courage, and creativity. As the hovercraft cleared a particularly violent energy burst, Kale spotted a narrow path between two partially intact towers. It led closer to the palace's central tower, where Lyra's family still awaited rescue teams. But the path was treacherous. Plasma columns shot unpredictably from the ground, and jagged debris dangled above, threatening to fall at any moment. "We have to go that way," Kale said, pointing toward the gap. "It's our only chance to reach a safe zone." Lyra nodded, trusting him completely. She had no other choice. She knew he had risked everything to save her. I'll follow you," she said, her voice firm despite her fear. Kale pushed the hovercraft forward. The narrow path demanded perfect timing and precision. Every second felt like a lifetime as they weaved through plasma bursts, dodged falling metal, and balanced over unstable structures. The inferno roared around them, shaking the craft with violent force. Yet Kale remained calm, focusing on one calculation after another, guiding them through the storm's deadly maze. Halfway through the path, a massive piece of debris fell from above. Kale swerved sharply, narrowly avoiding it. Sparks erupted as it hit the side of the hovercraft. Lyra gasped, her hands gripping the seat. "We're not going to make it," she whispered, fear breaking through for the first time. Kale glanced at her, meeting her gaze. "We will," he said firmly. "We're humans, we survive." With precise timing, he activated a sudden burst of thrusters, sending the hovercraft over the debris just as it would have crushed them. The craft landed on a narrow ledge of the palace roof, teetering dangerously. Kale exhaled slowly. They had made it, but only barely. They stepped out onto the roof, the storm battering them with wind and heat. The metal beneath their feet groaned, threatening to collapse at any moment. Kale extended a hand to Lyra, helping her maintain balance as they moved forward. The palace roof was partially destroyed, jagged edges of broken metal and concrete blocking their path. Each step was a careful calculation, a battle against gravity and the storm's unpredictable force. As they advanced, Kale spotted a section of the roof that was still intact, leading toward a safer part of the palace. But between them and that section, a massive plasma surge erupted from the floor, splitting the roof like a crack of fire. Kale's mind raced. There was no time to think of alternatives. Instinct had to take over. He grabbed a nearby metal beam, swinging it to knock aside smaller debris, creating a path for them. Then, with a quick glance at Lyra, he sprinted toward the plasma crack, leaping over it with her following closely. The heat was intense, almost unbearable, but they made it to the other side. Lyra's eyes were wide, her face flushed from the exertion and fear. You're incredible, she said, awe in her voice. Kale shook his head. We're incredible, together. You wouldn't have survived without me, and I wouldn't have risked it if it weren't you. They pressed on, moving through the storm-battered palace corridors. Every corner revealed new dangers, twisted metal, fire, falling debris. Yet Kale's calm focus guided them. He knew that hesitation here would mean death. His human instincts, honed through years of dangerous missions, allowed him to anticipate the storm's unpredictable patterns in ways machines never could. At one point, a massive door, weakened by fire, threatened to collapse on them. Kale yanked Lyra back just in time, the door crashing down with a deafening roar, sending dust and debris into the air. They were both shaken but alive. Lyra's admiration for Kale grew with every step. She realized that humans, with their courage and quick thinking, could survive where technology failed. Kale led her into a larger chamber, partially shielded from the storm's worst effects. Sparks from broken conduits lit the space, and fragments of the ceiling fell slowly, giving them brief respite between the storm's attacks. Kale examined the room quickly, identifying a safer path to the palace's exit. This way, he said, pointing toward a corridor that led to a secondary hovercraft landing zone. We'll use that to get off the roof and out of the storm. Lyra followed, her trust in him unwavering. She had faced danger before, but nothing like this. The combination of raw human courage, quick thinking, and instinct was astonishing. Every move Kale made seemed impossible, yet he executed it flawlessly. She felt a mix of fear and awe, realizing that she was witnessing the very essence of human heroism. They reached a stairwell that led upward to the landing zone. Kale moved first, holding the door for Lyra as they climbed. The stairs were warped and cracked, threatening to collapse under their weight. Sparks flew from exposed conduits, and heat radiated from the storm's energy that had penetrated the palace walls. Yet Kale moved with precision, guiding Lyra with calm authority. At the top of the stairs, they emerged onto the roof, where a hovercraft awaited. The craft's engines whined under the storm's interference, but it was operational. Kale helped Lyra aboard, checking the systems quickly. The storm had not eased, and the hovercraft would have to navigate through the most dangerous part of the inferno to escape. Kale took the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the chaos outside. Lyra sat beside him, watching with wide eyes. You really think we can make it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kale gave her a reassuring smile. "We have to, humans survive. And right now, we are humans fighting for life." The hovercraft lifted off, dodging plasma bursts and falling debris. Kale's training, instincts, and quick thinking guided them through the storm's deadly maze. They passed crumbling towers, molten streets, and burning vehicles, narrowly avoiding destruction at every turn. The city was a landscape of fire and chaos, but Kale's focus never wavered. As they approached the edge of the palace complex, the storm intensified. Plasma arcs leaped higher, wind gusts grew stronger, and the temperature rose dangerously. Kale adjusted the hovercraft's shields, bracing for impact. They would have to make a daring leap to escape the worst of the storm. Kale glanced at Lyra. "Hold on tight. This next part will be rough." Lyra nodded, gripping the seat as the hovercraft surged forward. With precise timing, Kale activated the thrusters, launching them over the most dangerous section of the storm. Plasma arcs struck the air around them, the hovercraft shaking violently. Sparks and energy bursts flew past, but Kale's focus guided them safely through. When they landed on a more stable section of the city, both were breathless but alive. Lyra looked at Kale with awe and gratitude. You risked everything for me," she said softly. Kale shook his head. "No," he said. "We risked everything. Together humans survive. Together we can face anything." They had passed the first trial of the inferno, but Kale knew it was far from over. The storm still raged, and the city was in ruins. Yet in that moment he felt a surge of quiet pride. Humanity had once again proven its courage, ingenuity, and resilience. Machines might be faster, stronger, or more precise, but humans had something no machine could replicate: instinct, creativity, and the will to survive against impossible odds. Kale allowed himself a brief glance at Lyra. Her eyes were wide with fear and admiration, and he knew that their journey was only beginning. The inferno had tested them, but they had survived, and human courage had won the first battle. The hovercraft soared above the broken city, its engines straining against the inferno's violent winds. Kale Rin's eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a faint glow marked the edge of a safer zone. Below, Volera Prime was a burning hellscape. Buildings had collapsed, streets had melted into rivers of molten energy, and the storm still raged with unrelenting fury. Every flash of plasma reminded him of how fragile human life could be against the forces of nature. Yet in that fragility there was also strength. Human courage, Kale thought, could outmatch even the deadliest storms. Lyra clutched the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. She had never imagined seeing her world so utterly destroyed. Sparks of energy danced across the air, arcs of lightning ripping between buildings. "Kale, can we really make it out of this?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. Kale glanced at her, giving a small, reassuring smile. "We will, you'll see. Human instinct and courage have gotten us this far, haven't they?" She nodded, still holding onto the edge of her seat. "Yes, but this is worse than anything I've ever imagined." Kale's mind raced. The hovercraft's shields were being tested with every second, the plasma arcs cracking against the hull. Instruments flashed warnings, but Kale relied on experience over technology. Machines could calculate speed and trajectory, but they lacked instinct, intuition, and the courage to act in unpredictable circumstances. That was humanity's advantage. As they moved forward, a sudden burst of plasma shot up from below, nearly striking the hovercraft. Kale swerved violently, feeling the engines strain. The craft tilted sharply, throwing Lyra against the seat. Sparks flew around them and the air vibrated with raw energy. Kale's grip never wavered. Every maneuver had to be perfect, every calculation exact, or they would not survive. Below, the streets were a battlefield of fire and molten debris. Drones that had attempted rescues lay scattered and broken. The inferno had claimed them instantly, proving that no machine could match the unpredictability of the storm. Kale's eyes narrowed. Humanity survived because humans could adapt, improvise, and act with courage where others froze. He hoped Lyra understood that instinct and quick thinking were as important as skill and technology. "Kale, look!" Lyra pointed ahead, her voice tense. A massive energy surge had erupted from a collapsed skyscraper, sending plasma arcs into the sky. The surge blocked their path. They couldn't turn back. The storm was closing in from every side. The only option was to go forward. Kale adjusted the thrusters, angling the hovercraft toward the energy surge. "Hold on tight," he said. "We're going through." The hovercraft shuddered as it entered the plasma storm. Lightning-like arcs struck the shields, sending jolts of energy through the craft. Lyra's scream echoed over the roar of the storm. Kale's hands moved instinctively, dodging and weaving through the arcs, timing every movement perfectly. Sparks flew, lighting their faces with fleeting bursts of bright white and blue. They passed through the surge with only inches to spare. The craft groaned under the strain, and Kale felt sweat drip down his face. "We're not out of danger yet," he said, his voice firm. "Stay alert." The storm seemed to respond to them, shifting unpredictably. Columns of fire erupted from the ruins below, and metal beams fell like jagged knives from above. Kale's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the exhilaration of survival. The inferno was testing them, but humans had survived far worse situations before. The storm might be deadly, but human courage and instinct were fiercer. Lyra's hands trembled as she watched debris fall around them. How do you stay so calm?" she asked. Kale smiled faintly. "Focus," he said. "Fear doesn't help, instinct does, courage does. Humans survive because we refuse to give up, no matter how impossible it seems." Another surge of plasma erupted, forcing Kale to dive low over a molten river. Sparks and flames leapt around them, scorching the hovercraft's hull. The heat was intense, but Kale ignored it. Every second counted. They had to reach the landing zone before the storm trapped them completely. He scanned the horizon and spotted a series of partially intact buildings forming a path to safety. "There," he said, pointing. "We can use those structures to guide us out." "It's risky, but it's our only way." Lyra nodded, her trust in him unwavering. She had seen enough of the storm to know that hesitation could mean death. Together, they angled the hovercraft toward the path, dodging columns of plasma and falling debris. The air shimmered with energy, the heat intense, but Kale's experience guided them through. At one point, a massive chunk of a building fell directly in their path. Kale swerved at the last moment, sparks flying as the edge of the hovercraft scraped against the debris. Lyra's heart raced, but she held on, following his movements instinctively. The hovercraft tilted dangerously, but Kale corrected it smoothly, using the engines to lift them just enough to clear the obstacle. They continued along the path, navigating through the storm's unpredictable chaos. Plasma arcs struck nearby buildings, sending shards of metal and stone into the air. Kale adjusted the shields and thrusters, timing every movement perfectly. They had survived so far, but the storm was far from over. Kale spotted an opening ahead, a larger building partially shielded from the storm's worst effects. "We can land there briefly," he said. "We need to rest the engines and plan our next move." Lyra exhaled, relief flooding her features. I thought we wouldn't make it," she admitted, her voice shaking. Kale shook his head. "We will make it. Humans survive because we act when others hesitate. Courage and instinct will carry us through." The hovercraft touched down on the roof, the metal groaning under their weight. Sparks flew from damaged panels and smoke rose from exposed engines. Kale quickly assessed the craft, making adjustments to stabilize it. Lyra stood beside him, still catching her breath. "Kale," she said, her voice trembling but determined, How can we continue? The storm, it's everywhere." Kale's gaze swept over the city, now a burning, twisted landscape. "We continue because we must. Humans survive by facing the impossible. We've already passed the first trials. The Inferno thinks it can defeat us, but it doesn't understand human courage. We'll find a way." He guided Lyra to a safer part of the roof, away from falling debris. The hovercraft rested there, engines humming softly. Sparks from damaged conduits lit the space in fleeting flashes, casting long shadows across the twisted metal. Lyra looked at Kale, her fear mingling with awe. She realized that he had risked everything to save her, and in doing so he had shown her the strength of human determination. "Kale," she said softly, I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "No thanks are needed. Humans survive because we act, because we care. Because we refuse to give up. That is enough." The storm outside still roared, but for a brief moment there was calm on the roof. Kale took a deep breath, scanning the horizon for the next challenge. The city was still dangerous, but he had a plan. Using the remaining intact structures, they could navigate toward the secondary landing zone, where another hovercraft awaited extraction. It would be risky, but humans thrived on risk, instinct, and courage. Kale adjusted the hovercraft systems, ensuring it could handle the next leg of the journey. Sparks still flew around them, the heat intense, but he remained focused. Lyra followed his lead, trusting his instincts completely. Together, they were more than a pilot and a princess. They were humans fighting for survival, testing the limits of courage against the deadliest storm in the galaxy. As the sun, or what remained of it, glimmered weakly through the storm clouds, Kale prepared to lift off. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Lyra nodded, gripping the controls for balance. "Ready." The hovercraft rose, engines roaring against the inferno. They moved forward, dodging plasma arcs, falling debris, and unpredictable bursts of energy. Each second was a test, each movement a gamble, but Kale's instincts guided them perfectly. Humanity had survived impossible odds before, and they would do so again. The inferno was not over, but Kale and Lyra were alive. They had passed the first trials of the storm, and their courage had proven stronger than fear. The city below was a testament to destruction, but above it, humans soared, unbroken, defiant, and determined. Kale glanced at Lyra, her eyes wide with admiration and fear. "We're not finished yet," he said. "The storm is strong, but so are we. Humans survive where others fail, and we will survive this too." Lyra nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Together, they soared into the storm, facing the unknown with courage, instinct, and unwavering determination. The inferno might rage, but human resilience burned brighter than any storm. The hovercraft soared above the ruins of Volera Prime, the inferno's roar still echoing across the shattered city. Kale kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for a safe zone where the ground was stable enough to land. The storm had weakened, but it was far from gone, and danger still lurked in every burst of plasma that leaped across the sky. Every moment demanded full attention. Every decision could mean life or death. Lyra sat beside him, exhausted but alert. Her hands rested lightly on the console, more from habit than necessity. She had survived the storm because of Kale, but she had begun to understand that her own courage mattered as well. Fear was present, but it did not control her. She had witnessed the power of human instinct and determination firsthand, and it inspired her more than she could express. Kale adjusted the hovercraft's shields, dodging another arc of plasma that shot from the ruins below. Sparks rained down, striking the hull with blinding flashes of light. The craft shuddered under the impact, but Kale's steady hands guided them forward. Machines might have calculated the odds of survival, but it was his human instinct that kept them alive. The unpredictability of the storm demanded more than programming. It demanded courage, quick thinking, and intuition. "We're close," Kale said, his voice calm but firm. "I can see a clearing ahead. It's large enough to land and it's stable, but we have to move fast." "The storm is still shifting." Lyra nodded, trying to steady her racing heart. "I trust you," she said. "Lead the way." Kale's gaze swept the landscape. The ruins of the city stretched out like a jagged scar. Buildings twisted and melted, streets flowed like rivers of fire, and the occasional drone carcass reminded them of technology's failure against the storm. But above all, humans still survived, and that was what mattered. He angled the hovercraft toward the clearing, adjusting the thrusters with precise timing. Plasma arcs erupted from buildings on either side, forcing him to weave through the chaos. Lyra's hands gripped the edge of the console as sparks flew around them. The hovercraft's hull groaned under stress, but Kale remained calm. Fear would accomplish nothing. Only focus and action mattered. As they approached the clearing, a massive surge of plasma shot up from the ground, cutting across their path. Kale made a split-second decision. He tilted the craft, rising just enough to clear the surge. Sparks leapt around them, and the heat was almost unbearable. Lyra's eyes widened, but she held her position, trusting Kale's judgment completely. The hovercraft landed smoothly in the clearing, skidding slightly on molten metal patches but remaining intact. Kale shut down the engines and let out a slow breath, allowing himself a brief moment of relief. They were alive. They had survived the Inferno's deadliest trials. Yet Kale knew this was only the beginning. The city was in ruins, and their journey was far from over. Lyra stepped out of the hovercraft, feeling the heat of the scorched ground beneath her boots. She looked around at the devastation and then at Kale. "We made it," she said softly, awe and gratitude in her voice. Kale gave her a faint smile. "Yes, but we're not done. The Queen will want to see you safe, and we need to get to the royal citadel. That will be the final step." The journey across the ruined city was perilous. Debris littered the ground, and pockets of unstable plasma erupted without warning. Kale guided them carefully, using his knowledge of human instinct to anticipate the danger. Each step required focus, courage, and quick thinking. Lyra followed, her own courage growing with every movement. Together they moved through the chaos, a testament to human resilience. Hours passed as they navigated the shattered streets, avoiding plasma bursts and collapsing buildings. Lyra had never felt so exhausted, yet she refused to stop. Kale's presence gave her strength. His calm confidence reminded her that humans could survive even the most impossible odds. She began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear. It was action in spite of fear. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the royal citadel. The main gates were damaged but passable, and guards had begun to restore order after the storm's worst assault. Kale and Lyra approached cautiously, ensuring they did not draw unnecessary attention. The guards recognized Lyra immediately and rushed forward, offering assistance. The Queen awaited inside the citadel, her presence commanding and regal despite the chaos outside. When Lyra and Kale entered, the room fell silent. The Queen's eyes studied them closely, noting the exhaustion on their faces and the determination in their eyes. "Princess Lyra," the Queen said, her voice steady but carrying a weight of authority, "you have returned safely. And who is this?" Kale stepped forward, standing tall despite the dirt, sweat, and soot covering him. "I am Kale Rin," he said simply. "I was tasked with rescuing the princess. The Inferno is unpredictable and deadly, but humans can adapt, survive, and prevail. I did what had to be done." The Queen's eyes softened as she looked at him. There was respect there, a recognition of human courage and determination. "You risked your life for my daughter?" she asked. Kale nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. Humans survive because we act, because we care. Because we refuse to let fear decide the outcome. The princess's life was worth every risk." Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Kale's arm. "She's right," she said. "I would not be here without him. His courage, quick thinking, and instinct saved me. I owe him everything." The Queen studied them both in silence, then nodded slowly. "Humans have always been resilient," she said, "and today you have proven it once more." Kale Rin, you have not only saved my daughter, but reminded us all that human courage can triumph even against the deadliest storms. For this, you will be rewarded. Kale remained calm, unsure what the queen meant. He had not acted for recognition or reward. He had acted because it was the only choice. Yet he stood silently, waiting. The queen took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. Kale Rin, you have proven your valor, your courage, and your loyalty. Therefore, as is tradition for those who risk their lives for the royal family, I decree you will be married to my daughter, Princess Lyra. The room fell silent. Lyra's eyes widened, her cheeks flushing with surprise and a hint of amusement. Kale blinked, processing the statement. Marriage. In the midst of chaos and destruction, the queen had made a decision that neither of them had anticipated. Lyra looked at Kale, her fear mingled with gratitude, admiration, and now something deeper, something unspoken between them. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Kale shook his head, a small smile forming on his lips. No words are needed, he said softly. We survived the impossible together, that is enough. The queen's gaze softened and she nodded approvingly. Very well, she said. You have earned more than survival. You have earned honor, respect, and the bond that comes with it. Let this marriage symbolize not only your courage, but the enduring spirit of humanity that survives against all odds. Lyra stepped closer to Kale, her hand brushing against his. The connection between them was quiet but strong, built on shared danger, trust, and survival. Neither had expected love or partnership in the Inferno's chaos, but human hearts often found ways to grow in the harshest conditions. Kale looked at her, his mind replaying the moments of the storm, the near-death experiences, and the instinctive leaps that had saved her life. He realized that their bond was forged not just in survival, but in understanding each other's courage, determination, and humanity. We survived, he said quietly. Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. Yes, together we survived. The queen watched them, a sense of pride in her expression. Let this be remembered, she said, her voice carrying authority and warmth, that even in the face of the most impossible challenges, human courage and unity prevail. And let it be remembered that those who act with valor and loyalty are honored, respected, and never forgotten. Kale and Lyra exchanged a quiet glance, the inferno now behind them, yet its lessons forever imprinted on their lives. The storm had tested them, pushed them to the brink, and revealed the true power of human instinct and courage. They had faced death, chaos, and destruction, and emerged alive, stronger, and united. Outside, the skies were clearing. The sun, faint but persistent, broke through the storm clouds, casting a golden light over the devastated city. Volera Prime was battered, scarred, and changed forever. Yet humanity endured. The people who had survived looked up at the sky with hope, inspired by the courage of a single human pilot who had leapt into the inferno for the sake of another. Kale Rin and Princess Lyra stood together, side by side, looking out at the city. They knew challenges would continue to arise, dangers would still lurk in the galaxy, and storms, both literal and metaphorical, would test them again. But they also knew that humans had the power to face the impossible, to survive, to rise, and to triumph. The Queen's decree was not just about marriage. It was a recognition of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Kale and Lyra's bond would serve as a living reminder of that truth, inspiring generations to come. In the end, the Inferno had not defeated them. It had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately revealed the strength that lay within humans. The strength to leap into danger, the strength to protect, the strength to survive, and the strength to love. And so, above the ruins of Volera Prime, the storm clouds parted, and humanity's light shone brighter than ever before. Kale Rin had leapt into the Inferno, saved the princess, and reminded everyone that human courage could never be destroyed. It could only rise, stronger, unbroken, and triumphant.